The city lights shined brightly across the tall buildings, and the grand hall of the Royal Star Hotel glowed like a jewel. It was the night of the annual gala, a party where the wealthiest and most powerful people gathered. Expensive cars lined the street, and guests in shining dresses and dark suits entered through tall glass doors. Inside, the sound of laughter, music, and clinking glasses filled the air. At the edge of this shining world stood Maria. She was dressed in a simple uniform, working as one of the maids for the evening. Her job was to serve drinks, carry trays, and keep the hall in perfect order. She moved quickly but quietly, her head slightly lowered, always careful not to disturb the guests. Maria's hands were steady, her steps light, and her eyes watched everything closely. Though she looked calm, Maria felt small in the middle of this grand event. She had worked many parties before, but every gala reminded her of the distance between her life and the lives of the guests. The chandeliers above her sparkled with hundreds of lights, but they seemed far away, almost like stars that could never be touched. The guests spoke about business, art, and travel. They raised their glasses and clapped at jokes. A live band played soft music near the stage, filling the hall with gentle notes. The party was alive with energy, and yet Maria felt invisible, moving from one corner to another like a shadow. Maria loved music. Few people knew this, because she never spoke about it. Long ago, before life became difficult, she had learned to play the piano. Her father had been a teacher, and he had given her lessons when she was still a child. The piano had been her world, her secret place of peace. But when her father passed away, and her family needed money, Maria stopped her lessons. Since then, her hands had been busy with work, not with music. Tonight, as she carried a tray of sparkling drinks, Maria passed by the grand piano in the center of the hall. It was polished and shining, waiting for someone to play. The band had taken a short break, and the instrument stood silent. Maria's eyes lingered on it for a moment too long. She quickly looked away, but inside her chest something stirred. The piano reminded her of dreams she once had, dreams of playing on a stage, filling the air with music that spoke from the heart. But now, those dreams seemed far away, like dust-covered books on a forgotten shelf. She sighed softly and continued her work. On the other side of the hall, a group of young guests were laughing together. They had noticed Maria glancing at the piano. To them, it was amusing. They were used to being entertained, and sometimes they found fun in things others did not. One of them whispered something, and soon the group was smiling mischievously. Maria did not notice them at first. She was too busy making sure the glasses on her tray did not spill. But then, one of the guests, a tall man in a bright suit, called her over. His voice was cheerful, but there was something playful in his eyes. "You there," he said with a smile, "come closer." Maria stopped, unsure. Slowly, she stepped forward, still holding the tray. "Yes, sir," she asked quietly. The man pointed at the grand piano. "We saw the way you looked at it. Do you play?" The question caught Maria by surprise. She froze for a moment, her fingers tightening around the tray. "I used to, sir," she replied softly, her eyes lowering. "Used to," the man repeated, raising an eyebrow. His friends leaned closer, curious. "Well then, why don't you play something for us? Just for fun." Maria's heart skipped a beat. The guests nearby turned their heads. Some laughed lightly, thinking it was a joke. Others smiled with interest. Maria felt her cheeks grow warm. She shook her head quickly. "Oh no, sir, I cannot. I am here to work." But the man waved his hand as if it was nothing. "Work can wait. Tonight is a night for music, for joy. Play us a song. Just one." Maria stood frozen, unsure of what to do. She wanted to refuse again, but part of her heart whispered that it had been years since she last touched a piano. Her soul longed to feel those keys under her fingers once more. The laughter around her made her nervous. She was not sure if they were serious, or if this was only a game to them. Yet something inside her said that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance. Her eyes moved toward the piano again. The shining instrument seemed to call her name. The hall grew quieter, waiting to see what she would do. Maria felt her chest rise and fall as she took a deep breath. Would she dare to step forward? Would she place her hands on those keys after so many silent years? The night was just beginning, but Maria's world was already changing. The gala was alive with chatter, but all eyes now rested on Maria. She stood with the tray in her hands, frozen in place. The tall man in the bright suit still smiled at her, waiting for an answer. His friends leaned closer, curious to see what would happen. Maria lowered her eyes. She wanted to walk away, to pretend she had not heard the invitation. She was only a maid. She was supposed to serve food, clear tables, and disappear into the background. Playing the piano in front of wealthy guests was not her place. But her heart beat faster, and her hands trembled slightly. The sound of the piano echoed in her mind, like a forgotten voice calling her back. The man clapped his hands once. Come now, we are all waiting. Do not be shy. Maria opened her mouth to refuse, but another guest, a woman in a silver dress, spoke first. Yes, let her play. It will be entertaining. We have had enough speeches tonight. Let us hear something fresh. A few people nearby nodded, some with interest, others with amusement. The suggestion spread quickly, and soon more eyes turned toward Maria. The young maid felt her chest tighten. She did not want to be the center of attention, yet the idea of touching the piano again filled her with a strange longing. She glanced around the hall. The band members had not yet returned. The piano stood waiting, its keys shining under the soft light of the chandelier. Maria placed the tray on a nearby table. Her steps were small and careful as she walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if she carried the weight of both fear and hope inside her. The crowd parted slightly to watch her. Some whispered, others smiled. A few crossed their arms, expecting nothing more than a clumsy attempt. To them, it was only a dare, a moment of fun in a long evening. Maria reached the piano and stood before it. She placed her hand lightly on the polished wood. The surface was cool under her fingers. She took a deep breath, her heart racing. It had been so long since she last sat before such an instrument. Slowly, she pulled out the bench and sat down. Her back was straight, her hands resting quietly on her lap. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Memories of her childhood came rushing back, the sound of her father's voice teaching her, the feel of the keys under her small hands, the joy of music filling their home. When she opened her eyes again, she saw her reflection on the black surface of the piano. She was no longer the little girl who dreamed of concerts. She was a maid in a gala full of strangers. Yet something inside her whispered that music still lived within her. The tall man laughed lightly. Well then, play us something simple. We do not expect a concert. Maria's fingers moved toward the keys. She touched them gently, almost afraid. The first note was soft, but it carried across the hall. A few guests chuckled, waiting to see more. At first, her hands hesitated. She pressed another key, then another. The melody was broken, uneven. Her fingers trembled with both fear and excitement. Some in the crowd smiled knowingly, as if they had expected this. But Maria did not stop. She kept pressing the keys, and slowly, her hands began to remember. The uneven notes grew smoother. The melody started to take shape. Her body relaxed little by little, and her mind slipped into the music she once loved. The laughter in the hall faded as the sound grew stronger. The room began to quiet down. The playful smiles on a few faces turned into looks of surprise. Maria's eyes were fixed on the keys. She forgot about the crowd. She forgot about her uniform. All she knew was the music rising from her fingertips. Each note carried a piece of her heart, and the melody flowed like a hidden river finally set free. The woman in the silver dress tilted her head, listening more carefully. Another guest leaned forward, his smile gone, his expression thoughtful. Maria did not notice. She was lost in the world of sound. Her hands moved faster now, confident, graceful. The piano sang under her touch, filling the hall with warmth. The tall man who had dared her stood with his arms folded, his playful grin fading into astonishment. He had expected a joke, perhaps a few clumsy notes, but this was different. The maid's music carried emotion, and it held the room captive. One by one, the guests stopped talking. The clinking of glasses ended. Even the servants at the edges of the hall paused to listen. The sound of the piano filled every corner, soft yet powerful. Maria felt alive. It was as if all the years of silence had been broken at last. She poured her soul into the keys, each note rising higher, brighter. The music carried both joy and sadness, like a story told without words. When she finally lifted her hands, the last note lingered in the air, fading slowly. The hall was silent. No one laughed now. Every face was turned toward her, their eyes wide. Maria lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. She had not meant to lose herself in the music. She had only wanted to play for a moment. Now the silence felt heavy. Had she done something wrong? Or had the music reached them in a way they never expected? The night had changed again. The dare was over, but something greater had begun. For a long moment the hall was silent. Maria kept her head low, her hands resting gently on her lap. She did not dare look up. She thought maybe the guests were still waiting to laugh, or perhaps they were only surprised because they had not expected anything at all. Then a sound broke the silence. It was a soft clap. One pair of hands, then another. Soon the clapping spread across the hall. Guests who had first smiled with amusement were now applauding with respect. Some even stood to see her more clearly. Maria's cheeks warmed. She wanted to disappear into the crowd, but at the same time her heart was full. It had been so long since anyone had listened to her play. The tall man in the bright suit stepped forward. His playful grin had turned into a look of wonder. "That was unexpected," he said with a small laugh. "You play very well." Maria rose from the bench quickly, bowing her head. "Thank you, sir. I should return to work now." But before she could step away, another voice came from the crowd. It was the woman in the silver dress. "No, play again. The evening has just grown brighter. One song is not enough." Several other guests nodded. They looked not at a maid now, but at a musician who had captured their attention. Maria's hands tightened against her dress. She wanted to refuse, to remind them she was only a worker here. Yet the piano still called to her, and the longing in her heart had not yet faded. She turned slowly, her eyes falling once more on the shining keys. The guests waited, their faces filled with curiosity. The air felt different now. There was no laughter, no teasing. The room was calm, almost expectant. Maria sat again. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She searched inside her memory for a piece she had once loved. Her father had taught it to her when she was young. It was a gentle song, one that carried hope like the first light of morning. Her fingers touched the keys, and the melody began. This time there was no hesitation. The notes flowed smoothly, soft yet strong. Each sound was clear, each movement graceful. The guests leaned closer. The music wrapped around them, pulling them into a world beyond the glittering hall. Some forgot their drinks, others stopped whispering to each other. They simply listened. Maria felt as though she was speaking with her heart. The piano became her voice, telling stories she could not put into words. The notes rose and fell, sometimes tender, sometimes bright. It was as if the music carried both the struggles of her life and the quiet dreams she still held inside. Near the back of the hall, an older man adjusted his glasses and whispered, "This is no simple talent. She plays with true feeling." A younger guest beside him nodded. "It is rare to hear music like this. It touches the soul." Maria did not hear their words. She was lost in the melody. Her eyes stayed closed, her head slightly bowed. The music carried her back to her childhood home, to evenings where her father sat beside her, guiding her hands across the keys. She remembered his smile, his gentle voice telling her that music was not only sound but also emotion. The memory brought tears to her eyes, but she kept playing. The notes shimmered like stars, each one carrying a piece of that memory into the hall. The tall man who had dared her felt a strange weight in his chest. He had never expected that his playful challenge would reveal such beauty. He glanced at his friends, who stood in silence, their earlier amusement gone. The woman in the silver dress placed a hand over her heart. Her eyes shined, reflecting the light of the chandelier above. She whispered softly, "She plays like someone who has lived many stories." As the song came to an end, Maria let her hands rest on the keys for a final moment. Then she lifted them gently, and the last note faded like a sigh. This time the applause came faster, louder, filling the hall with sound. Guests stood from their tables, clapping with true admiration. Some even called out words of praise. Maria opened her eyes slowly. She was trembling, not from fear but from the flood of emotions inside her. She bowed her head again, unsure of how to respond to such attention. A man with gray hair and a kind face stepped forward. He was one of the sponsors of the gala, known for his love of the arts. "Young lady," he said warmly, "you have given us a gift tonight. Talent like yours does not belong in silence. May we know your name?" Maria hesitated, her voice quiet. "Maria, sir." The man nodded. "Maria, you have moved us all. Your music speaks with honesty. It is rare, and it is precious." The applause rose once more, stronger than before. Maria's heart swelled. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as a maid, not as a worker in the background, but as someone who carried music within her. But even as joy filled her, a question echoed in her mind. What would this night mean for her tomorrow? Would she return to her quiet life, or had the first notes of her new beginning already been written? The gala was far from over, and Maria's story had only just begun. The hall that had once echoed with laughter and clinking glasses was now filled with a calm silence. After Maria's second song, no one rushed back to their conversations. No one called for more drinks or demanded the band return. The grand gala had changed its rhythm. All eyes still lingered on the maid who had just filled the room with music. Maria sat quietly on the bench, unsure of what to do next. She wanted to slip away, to return to her work as if nothing had happened. But her hands still tingled from the keys, and her heart beat with a strength she had not felt in years. The older sponsor who had asked for her name leaned closer to another guest. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. "The silence after her music. That silence is not emptiness. It is respect." Indeed, the silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came when people had been deeply moved and did not wish to break the spell too quickly. Finally, the tall man in the bright suit, the very one who had dared Maria, spoke. His voice was softer than before. "I think we owe her more than applause. Tonight she has reminded us of what music truly is." His words carried through the crowd, and many nodded. The earlier mischief in his eyes was gone, replaced by something close to admiration. Maria rose slowly from the piano bench. She bowed her head, her face still warm with shyness. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice was barely heard. She tried to step back, but once again, The woman in the silver dress lifted her hand. "Please, Maria, play one more. Let the night not end with only 2 songs. We wish to hear more of your heart." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some clapped gently, encouraging her. Maria hesitated. Deep inside, she wanted nothing more than to sit again and let the music pour out. But she also felt the weight of her position. She was only a maid, not a performer invited to the stage. She worried her employer might be displeased if she stole too much attention. Still, the piano seemed to call her back. She looked around the hall. The chandeliers glowed softly above, the guests stood waiting with quiet anticipation, and the silence was filled with hope. She sat once more. This time, she chose a piece that was slower, deeper, filled with emotion. Her fingers moved across the keys with grace, and the sound spread like a gentle wave. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, tender, but powerful in its own way. The silence grew even stronger. Not a single glass clinked. Not a single voice whispered. The guests stood as if enchanted, listening to every note. Some closed their eyes, others leaned forward, afraid to miss even the smallest sound. The woman in the silver dress felt tears touch her cheeks. She quickly brushed them away, not wanting others to notice. Yet she was not alone. Several guests felt the same weight in their hearts. The music seemed to speak to something hidden deep inside them, memories of childhood, of family, of dreams once held. Maria's own eyes glistened as she played. This song was one she had made up herself many years ago. She had never shared it with anyone. It was born from her own life, her own struggles, her own hopes. Now it filled the grand hall, speaking in a language no words could capture. The tall man in the bright suit lowered his head, his earlier pride softened. For the first time that night, he felt humbled. The sponsor with gray hair whispered again, his voice trembling, "This is not entertainment. This is art." When Maria finished, she let her hands rest gently on the keys. The last note faded like the echo of a heartbeat. She lifted her hands, and once again the silence spread. This time, however, it lasted longer than before. No one rushed to clap. No one moved. The silence was not hesitation but reverence. The hall seemed to hold its breath, as if afraid that any sound might shatter the fragile beauty left hanging in the air. Maria sat very still. She could feel the silence pressing around her, but it did not feel heavy. It felt like a soft embrace. For the first time, she understood what her father had once told her, that sometimes silence after music is louder than thunder. At last, the applause began. It was not wild or noisy, but steady and strong. Guests clapped with sincerity, their faces serious, their eyes shining. Some even bowed their heads slightly, a gesture of true respect. Maria rose, her legs trembling. She bowed low, her voice once again quiet. "Thank you." The hall was still filled with calm. Though people began to move again, the energy of the party had changed. The gala was no longer only about wealth, jewels, and laughter. It had become something deeper, something unforgettable. Maria stepped away from the piano, her heart heavy with both joy and fear. She had given them her music, but what would happen now? Would her employers scold her for stepping out of her place? Or would this night open a door she had never dreamed could exist? The guests continued to speak softly among themselves, praising her talent. Many eyes followed her as she moved quietly back toward her duties. But nothing in the room felt the same. The growing silence she had created still lingered, even as the band prepared to return. Maria knew in her heart that something inside her had been awakened again, and perhaps something inside the guests as well. The night was far from over. After Maria stepped away from the piano, the hall still carried the weight of her music. The guests tried to return to their talks, but their voices were softer now. The air was different, touched by something they had not expected when the night began. Maria quietly picked up a tray again. She moved between the tables, offering drinks with her usual grace. But this time, people looked at her differently. They no longer saw only a maid in uniform. They saw the woman who had played the piano with such power and tenderness. Some guests smiled at her with respect. A few nodded politely as she passed. Maria lowered her eyes, not sure how to carry this new attention. She wished to blend back into the shadows, yet she could feel the whispers following her. At one corner of the hall, two older women spoke softly. "Did you hear how she played?" one asked. "Yes," the other replied. "It was not only skill. It was feeling. She has lived something that taught her how to pour her soul into music." The woman in the silver dress, who had first asked Maria to continue playing, now sat quietly with her hands folded. Her eyes followed Maria's every move. She turned to the tall man in the bright suit. "Do you see what you started with your dare? You thought it would be amusing, but look what was revealed." The man nodded slowly, his usual confidence dimmed. "I did not know she carried such a gift." None of us knew. Nearby, the sponsor with gray hair leaned forward, speaking to another guest. "I would like to know her story. Talent like hers does not grow without reason. She must have lived close to music once." Later in the evening, as Maria returned to the service table, the sponsor approached her. His steps were calm, his smile kind. "Maria," he said gently, "I hope you forgive me for asking, but how did you learn to play like that?" Maria froze for a moment. She had not spoken about her past in years. To her, it was like a box she had locked away, too painful to open. But the warmth in his voice gave her courage. "My father," she said softly. "He was a teacher. He taught me when I was young. We had an old piano in our home. It was not as fine as this one, but it was ours. He said music was a language of the heart." The sponsor nodded, listening carefully. "And you stopped playing?" Maria lowered her gaze. "When my father passed, life changed. We could not keep the piano. I had to work to help my family. Since then, I have not played much. Only in my mind." The man's eyes softened. He placed a hand gently over his chest. "Then what you gave us tonight was more than skill. It was memory, love, and strength. That is why we felt it so deeply." Maria bowed her head, unsure how to answer. She was not used to being praised. Other guests had gathered nearby, curious to hear. One of them, a young woman with golden earrings, asked, "Maria, do you ever wish to play again? Not just here by chance, but truly, as you once dreamed?" Maria's heart ached at the question. She looked down at her hands. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I wish it every day. But dreams are not always possible." The guests around her exchanged glances. They were touched not only by her music but also by her honesty. The tall man in the bright suit stepped forward again. His voice carried less pride now, more sincerity. "Maria, tonight you have given us a gift greater than anything money can buy. You reminded us what true art feels like. Perhaps it is time you are given a chance to share that gift with more people." Maria looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She had never imagined such words from him. The sponsor with gray hair nodded firmly. "Yes. A voice like hers cannot stay hidden in the background. It belongs on a stage where the world can hear." Maria felt overwhelmed. Her heart raced as she looked at the faces around her. They were serious, not mocking. They truly believed in her talent. For years she had buried her dream, telling herself it was gone. Yet tonight, with only a few songs, it had been brought back to life. The woman in the silver dress leaned closer, her voice soft. "Maria, sometimes life hides treasures in plain sight. Tonight, you are that treasure." Maria's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly blinked them away. She bowed deeply, her voice trembling. "Thank you. I never thought anyone would listen again." The crowd around her grew silent once more, not because of music this time, but because of the truth in her words. Many of them felt humbled. They lived in luxury, yet here was a young maid who carried a gift greater than jewels, a gift born not of wealth but of heart. The sponsor spoke again, his voice steady. "Maria, if you wish it, I will help you. There are schools, concerts, places where talent like yours can shine. You only need to take the first step." Maria's breath caught. The offer sounded like a door opening, a door she had long thought locked forever. She bowed her head once more. "I will think about it, sir." The night was not over, but Maria knew something inside her had changed. The hidden story of her past had been spoken aloud, and now the path to her future was beginning to show itself. The gala continued, but everyone knew the brightest moment of the evening had already passed the moment a maid's hidden gift was revealed. The gala moved forward, but the glow of Maria's music still lingered. The band returned and played again, yet their polished notes felt different now. The guests listened politely, but many eyes drifted back to Maria as she worked quietly in the background. Maria tried to stay focused on her duties. She carried trays, refilled glasses, and cleared plates. Yet her heart was no longer steady. It beat with the memory of the piano under her fingers. She felt both nervous and alive. The music she had given to the room was still inside her, echoing like a song that refused to fade. At one point, the woman in the silver dress approached her. She placed a hand gently on Maria's arm. "You do not need to hide in the shadows anymore," she whispered. "What you gave us tonight was more than music. It was truth. You must play again." Maria smiled faintly, though her eyes were lowered. "I am grateful, madam. But I am only here to serve." The woman shook her head. "No. Tonight, you are here to shine." Her words touched Maria, but before she could reply, the sponsor with gray hair called across the hall. His voice was warm yet firm. "Friends, the evening has been blessed with a rare gift. I believe we all agree we wish to hear it once more." A murmur of agreement rose from the guests. They turned toward Maria, their eyes bright with expectation. Maria froze, her tray balanced carefully in her hands. She felt the weight of every gaze. Her first instinct was to refuse. She did not want to appear as though she sought attention. Yet a stronger voice inside her whispered that this was her chance to speak with the only language she truly owned, the language of music. Slowly, she placed the tray on a nearby table. Her steps carried her once more to the grand piano. The hall quieted at once. Even the band paused, respecting the moment. Maria sat at the bench, her hands resting lightly on the keys. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. This time, she did not think of the guests. She did not think of her uniform or her duties. She thought only of her father's words: "Music must come from the heart, or it is nothing at all." Her fingers pressed the keys, and a new song began. It started softly, like a whisper. The notes rose gently, almost shy. Then, slowly, the melody grew. Each sound carried warmth, as if the piano itself was speaking. It was not a song she had learned from any book. It was her own, built from years of silence and longing. The guests leaned forward, caught at once by the honesty of the sound. They could hear her story within the music: the sadness of loss, the weight of work, the quiet dreams hidden away. But they could also hear her strength, her hope, and her unbroken spirit. Maria played with her whole being. Her fingers moved faster, her shoulders swayed with the rhythm. Her eyes stayed closed, her face calm but glowing. She was not simply performing, she was opening her soul. The silence in the hall grew deeper. The chandeliers sparkled above, but no one noticed them. The guests were captured completely by the music. Some placed their hands over their hearts, others let tears slip quietly down their cheeks. The tall man in the bright suit felt his throat tighten. He remembered how he had dared her as a game, never thinking it would lead to this. He lowered his head, humbled by the beauty that had come from his careless challenge. The woman in the silver dress pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. She whispered, "She plays like her heart has walked through both storms and sunshine." The sponsor with gray hair closed his eyes and listened. He thought of the many concerts he had attended, the countless musicians he had heard. Yet this simple maid touched him more deeply than any polished stage performance ever had. Maria's music climbed higher now, shining like light breaking through clouds. The notes carried hope, like a promise of tomorrow. It was as if she was telling herself, and everyone in the hall, that even in hardship beauty could live, and even in silence songs could survive. The final part of her melody slowed, gentle as a lullaby. Her fingers pressed the last keys softly, letting the sound fade into the quiet hall. Maria lifted her hands, her eyes opening slowly. She felt tears on her own cheeks but did not wipe them away. The silence that followed was so deep it seemed the entire world was holding its breath. Then the applause came. It was not rushed or shallow. It was thunderous, rising like a wave, shaking the hall. Guests stood from their chairs, clapping with full hearts. Some even shouted her name, their voices filled with joy. Maria bowed her head, her face glowing with both shyness and pride. She had not planned to play like this, but her soul had guided her, and the room had received it. As she stood, the sponsor with gray hair stepped forward again. His voice carried across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have witnessed not only talent but truth. Maria does not simply play notes, she gives us her heart. This is a gift the world must not ignore." The applause grew louder, echoing like thunder under the crystal chandeliers. Maria covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. For years she had hidden her dream, believing it was gone. But tonight, in front of strangers who had become listeners, her heart had spoken louder than she ever imagined. She bowed again, tears shining in her eyes. The gala was no longer about riches or fashion. It had become a stage for something greater, the heart of the music. The gala had reached its final hours, but no one seemed to notice. Guests were still talking about Maria, the young maid who had brought music to life in their grand hall. Even the band had paused their instruments, waiting for her to play again, though she did not. Tonight, she had given all that she could. Maria returned to her duties quietly, carrying trays and refilling glasses. Yet her steps felt lighter, and her heart felt full. She no longer felt invisible. The applause, the whispers of respect, and the praise she had received had awakened something within her. The woman in the silver dress approached once more. "Maria, you have shown everyone what courage and talent can do. You must not hide again. There is a place for you beyond this gala, a place where people will truly listen to you." Maria smiled faintly. "I never thought anyone would care about my music," she admitted softly. The tall man in the bright suit nodded. "We all care, Maria. You have reminded us that real beauty does not come from wealth or power. It comes from the heart. Tonight, you reminded all of us that life can surprise us in the best ways." The sponsor with gray hair stepped closer. "Maria, I have connections with schools and concert halls. If you wish, I can introduce you to people who can guide your talent, help you grow, and give you the opportunities you deserve." Maria's eyes widened. For years, she had believed her dream was lost, hidden behind duties and hardship. Yet here, in one evening, the world had opened a door she never imagined would be opened again. She thought of her father, who had first taught her to play. His gentle hands guiding hers across the keys, his warm smile encouraging her. She had carried his lessons in her heart, and now they had returned to her life. I would like that," Maria whispered. "I want to play, and I want others to hear it." The guests nearby nodded with approval. Some clapped gently, while others smiled warmly. For them, Maria's music was no longer a surprise. It had become a story of hope, courage, and talent hidden in plain sight. Later, as the gala began to close, the hall slowly emptied. Guests departed in their elegant cars, still talking about the young maid who had touched their hearts. Maria helped clear the remaining tables, but she did so with a sense of pride. Her steps were no longer quiet or careful, they carried purpose. The tall man in the bright suit approached her one last time. "Maria," he said kindly, "you have shown that courage can appear in the simplest acts." Even a dare, meant as a joke, became a moment of truth. "Remember this night. It is only the beginning." Maria nodded, feeling tears threaten again. "I will remember, sir. Thank you for believing in me." The sponsor with gray hair handed her a small card. "Call me tomorrow," he said. "We will help you start. Your music should not wait any longer." Maria held the card tightly in her hand. She could hardly believe it. For so long, her life had been about work, about surviving. Now, suddenly, she had a chance to live her dream. She looked around the empty hall. The grand piano still stood in the center, silent, waiting for the next song. Maria approached it, running her fingers lightly across the keys. They were cool and smooth, familiar and comforting. She smiled, feeling the memories of her childhood return, but this time mixed with hope for the future. As she played a soft, gentle tune alone, she realized something important. Music was not only about skill. It was about courage, about letting oneself be seen, about sharing the heart with others. She had done that tonight, and it had changed everything. Her thoughts drifted to the people she would meet, the teachers, the audiences, the new friends who would listen to her play. She imagined a stage where her music could travel far, touching hearts beyond the walls of this hotel. Maria knew that life would not be easy. There would still be challenges, doubts, and fears. But she also knew she had strength within her. The courage to play in front of strangers had opened her eyes to her own power. As the first morning light touched the city, Maria finally left the hall. She walked slowly, her steps steady. In her hand was the card that held a new beginning. In her heart was the memory of her father and the music that had always lived inside her. She looked up at the sky, smiling. The world was large, full of opportunities she had never dreamed of. And now, with music in her heart, she was ready to embrace it. Maria's story had changed that night. A simple dare had revealed a hidden gift. A young maid had reminded the world that talent, courage, and heart could shine even in the most unexpected places. And for Maria, this was only the beginning of a new life, filled with music, hope, and endless possibilities.